The rain was coming down hard that Thursday evening in October. Lisa Rodriguez hurried down the courthouse steps, her expensive heels clicking against the wet marble. She clutched her leather briefcase tight against her chest, trying to protect the important papers inside from getting soaked. At 28 years old, Lisa had everything she thought she wanted. Her corner office on the 40th floor gave her a perfect view of Central Park. Her closet was full of designer suits that cost more than most people made in a month. She drove a sleek black BMW and lived in a penthouse apartment that was featured in home magazines. But success came with a price. Lisa worked 14-hour days, sometimes sleeping on the couch in her office. She barely had time to eat proper meals, living on coffee and takeout food. Her phone never stopped ringing with calls from clients who expected her to solve their problems immediately. That particular Thursday had been especially brutal. She had been in court since 8 in the morning, fighting a complex corporate case that could make or break her career. The opposing lawyer was known for being ruthless, and the judge seemed to favor the other side. Lisa felt the pressure building in her chest as the day wore on. The case involved a large construction company that was being sued by several families. The families claimed the company had built their homes using cheap materials that made them sick. Lisa was representing the construction company, and she knew that losing this case would cost her firm millions of dollars. During the lunch break, her boss had pulled her aside. His face was serious as he reminded her how important this case was for the firm. "Win this and you're looking at a partnership," he had said. "But if we lose..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Lisa understood perfectly. The afternoon session had gone better than expected. Lisa had found a small mistake in the other side's paperwork that could change everything. She felt a rush of excitement as she presented her findings to the judge. For the first time all day, she saw doubt creep into the opposing lawyer's eyes. When court finally ended at 6:30, Lisa was exhausted but hopeful. She had done everything she could, and now it was up to the judge to decide. As she packed her papers into her briefcase, she allowed herself to imagine what it would feel like to become the youngest partner in the firm's history. The courthouse was nearly empty as she made her way to the exit. Most of the other lawyers and court staff had left hours ago. Her heels echoed in the quiet hallways as she walked past closed offices and empty courtrooms. Outside, the October evening was cold and wet. The rain had started just as she was leaving, and she cursed herself for not bringing an umbrella. The weather forecast had called for clear skies, but October in New York was always unpredictable. Lisa pulled out her phone to call for a taxi, but the screen showed no signal. The tall buildings around the courthouse often blocked cell phone reception, and tonight was no exception. She would have to walk to the street corner to get a better signal. The courthouse steps were steep and made of smooth marble that had been polished to a shine. On a dry day, they were beautiful and impressive. But in the rain, they became treacherous. Lisa had walked down these same steps hundreds of times before, but tonight felt different. She was tired, stressed, and thinking about the case instead of watching where she was going. Her mind was racing with all the things she needed to do tomorrow. She had 3 more cases to prepare for, 2 client meetings, and a stack of contracts to review. As she reached the halfway point on the steps, her right heel caught on a small crack in the marble. For a split second, she felt herself losing balance. Time seemed to slow down as she realized what was happening. Her briefcase flew out of her hand, spilling papers that scattered in the wind and rain. She tried to grab the handrail, but her fingers slipped on the wet metal. Her body twisted as she fell, and she could hear the sickening sound of her head hitting the stone. The world spun around her as she tumbled down step after step. Each impact sent a shock of pain through her body. She could taste blood in her mouth and feel the rain washing over her face as she finally came to rest at the bottom of the steps. For a moment, everything was silent except for the sound of rain hitting the pavement. Lisa tried to move, but something was wrong. She could feel the cold concrete beneath her back, but below her waist there was nothing. No pain. No sensation at all. Panic started to set in as she realized she couldn't feel her legs. She tried to sit up, but her body wouldn't respond the way it should. Her expensive suit was torn and dirty, and she could see blood on her hands where she had tried to break her fall. A security guard who had been making his rounds heard the commotion and came running. His face went pale when he saw Lisa lying motionless at the bottom of the steps. He immediately called for an ambulance while kneeling beside her. "Don't try to move," he said in a gentle voice. Help is coming. Lisa wanted to tell him that she couldn't move even if she tried, but the words wouldn't come. She stared up at the dark sky, feeling the rain on her face and wondering how her perfect life had fallen apart so quickly. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes, but to Lisa, it felt like hours. The paramedics were professional and efficient, asking her questions about her pain levels and checking her vital signs. When they asked if she could feel them touching her legs, Lisa's worst fears were confirmed. She couldn't feel anything below her waist. As they loaded her into the ambulance, Lisa caught a glimpse of her scattered papers blowing around in the rain. All those important documents that had seemed so crucial just minutes before now looked like trash littering the courthouse steps. The ride to the hospital was a blur of flashing lights and medical equipment. The paramedics worked quickly, starting an IV and monitoring her condition. Lisa heard them talking to the hospital over the radio, using medical terms she didn't understand. At the hospital, everything moved fast. Doctors and nurses surrounded her, asking questions and running tests. She was rushed into an examination room where they took X-rays and did scans of her spine. The emergency room doctor was kind, but direct. He explained that she had suffered a severe injury to her spinal cord. The full extent of the damage wouldn't be known until the swelling went down. But the early signs were not encouraging. Lisa's world, which had been moving at breakneck speed just hours before, suddenly came to a complete stop. The woman who had spent her life climbing ladders and conquering challenges now couldn't even move her own legs. As the nurses prepared her for surgery, Lisa stared at the ceiling tiles and wondered if this was how her story would end. She had worked so hard to build her perfect life, and now it was all falling apart, just like her tumble down those courthouse steps. The white ceiling of room 314 at Mount Sinai Hospital became Lisa's entire world. She had been staring at the same water stain for 3 weeks now, counting the tiny cracks that spread out like a spider web above her bed. The surgery had lasted 8 hours. When Lisa woke up, her spine was held together with metal rods and screws, but the damage was already done. Dr. Peterson, the head of neurosurgery, had explained it to her in simple terms that she would never forget. The impact compressed your spinal cord at the L1 vertebra, he had said, pointing to an X-ray that looked like a broken puzzle. We've done everything we can to stabilize the area, but the nerve damage is extensive. Lisa had asked the question that was burning in her mind. Will I walk again? Dr. Peterson had paused for a long moment before answering. There's always hope, but I need to be honest with you. The chances are very small. Less than 5% of patients with this type of injury regain significant mobility. 5%. Those 2 words echoed in Lisa's mind every single day. She had built her career on much better odds than that, but this wasn't a case she could win with clever arguments and legal research. The first month was filled with visitors. Her colleagues from the law firm brought flowers and get-well cards. They talked about how much they missed her and how everyone was hoping for her quick recovery. But Lisa could see the discomfort in their eyes when they looked at her legs, motionless under the thin hospital blanket. Her boss, Mr. Harrison, visited twice. The first time, he brought a fruit basket and talked about keeping her position open. The second time, a month later, he was more direct about the firm's situation. They couldn't wait indefinitely for her return, and her cases had been distributed among other lawyers. Of course, you'll always have a place with us, he had said, but his words felt empty. When you're ready to come back, we'll find something suitable for your situation. Something suitable. Lisa understood exactly what that meant. No more courtroom battles, no more high-profile cases, no more partnership track. Just a desk job doing paperwork and research for other lawyers who could still walk into a courtroom. Her friends from law school came by regularly at first. They brought magazines and chocolates, chatting about their latest cases and office gossip. But as the weeks turned into months, their visits became less frequent. It was hard to maintain friendships when one person was stuck in a hospital bed, unable to participate in the dinners, parties, and networking events that had once been the center of their social lives. The worst part wasn't the physical pain, though that was considerable. It was the way people looked at her now. Before the accident, Lisa had commanded respect when she walked into a room. Opposing lawyers feared her sharp mind and quick wit. Clients trusted her to fight for them and win. Now people spoke to her in softer voices as if she were fragile. They tilted their heads with sympathy and asked how she was holding up. The woman, who had once negotiated million-dollar deals, was now someone others felt sorry for. The physical therapy sessions were torture. A cheerful therapist named Monica came by 3 times a week, trying to get Lisa to move to a wheelchair and work on basic exercises. Monica was relentlessly positive, talking about rebuilding strength and adapting to new challenges. Many of our patients go on to live full, productive lives, Monica would say while helping Lisa transfer from the bed to a wheelchair. It's all about attitude and accepting your new normal. New normal. Lisa hated those words. Her old normal had been winning cases, making 6-figure bonuses and planning her rise to senior partner. Her new normal was learning how to use the bathroom independently and hoping she wouldn't get pressure sores from sitting too long. After 6 weeks, Lisa stopped cooperating with physical therapy. When Monica arrived with her clipboard and encouraging smile, Lisa would turn her face to the wall and refuse to participate. What was the point of learning to navigate the world in a wheelchair when she didn't want to be part of that world anymore? The depression crept in slowly, like fog rolling in from the ocean. At first, Lisa told herself she was just having bad days. Everyone was entitled to feel sorry for themselves after a life-changing accident. But the bad days turned into bad weeks, and the bad weeks stretched into months. She stopped reading the legal journals that colleagues brought her. She turned off the TV when the news came on, unable to bear hearing about other people's problems when her own seemed overwhelming. She barely touched the hospital food, eating just enough to keep the nurses from worrying. Her sister Karen drove down from Boston every weekend, bringing homemade cookies and updates about her kids. Karen was 4 years older and had always been the practical one in the family. She worked as a teacher and lived a quiet life in the suburbs with her husband and 2 children. "You need to start thinking about what comes next," Karen said during one visit. "The doctors say you can be discharged soon, but you need to have a plan." Lisa stared out the window at the busy street below. People were walking by, going about their normal lives, taking their ability to walk for granted. "I don't want to plan anything," she said. "I just want to be left alone." Karen sat on the edge of the hospital bed, her face serious. "That's not you talking, Lisa. That's the depression. The sister I know never gave up on anything in her life." But Lisa didn't feel like that person anymore. The woman who had fought her way through law school, who had worked 18-hour days to make partner, who had never backed down from a challenge, that woman had died on the courthouse steps along with the feeling in her legs. The insurance company had approved her stay for 3 months, but that time was almost up. She would have to leave the safety of the hospital room and figure out how to live in a world designed for people who could walk. Her penthouse apartment had stairs leading to the entrance and wasn't accessible for wheelchairs. She would need to find a new place to live, learn to drive a specially equipped car, and somehow rebuild a life that felt worth living. The night before her discharge, Lisa lay in the dark listening to the sounds of the hospital. Nurses walking by in the hallway, monitors beeping, the occasional ambulance arriving at the emergency room. For 3 months this had been her world, and despite everything it felt safe. Tomorrow she would have to face the real world again, but she wasn't sure she had the strength. The woman who had once fearlessly argued cases in front of judges now felt afraid of something as simple as going to the grocery store. As she finally drifted off to sleep, Lisa wondered if this was how her story would end, not with the success and recognition she had once dreamed of, but with a slow fade into irrelevance and despair. Karen had been watching her sister fade away for months, and she couldn't stand it anymore. Lisa had been discharged from the hospital 2 weeks ago and was staying in a ground-floor apartment that Karen had helped her find. It was a small, depressing place with outdated furniture and bars on the windows. Every day Karen called to check on Lisa, and every day the conversation was the same. Lisa would say she was fine, but Karen could hear the emptiness in her voice. She wasn't eating properly, wasn't leaving the apartment, and had refused to see the therapist that Dr. Peterson had recommended. The Lisa that Karen remembered from childhood was stubborn, competitive, and never gave up on anything. She was the little girl who had refused to come inside until she learned to ride her bike without training wheels. She was the teenager who had studied for 16 hours a day to get into the best law school in the country. But now, that fighting spirit seemed completely gone. Lisa spent her days watching television and staring out the window. She had turned down 3 job offers from smaller law firms saying she wasn't ready to work yet. Karen suspected she would never feel ready if things continued this way. The idea came to Karen during a particularly difficult phone call. Lisa had been complaining about how complicated everything was now. How long it took to get dressed, how exhausting it was to go to the store, how people stared at her wheelchair. Karen had listened patiently, but inside she was growing frustrated. "You know what?" Karen had said suddenly. "You need to get out of that city." Lisa had laughed bitterly. "And go where? My whole life is here." "No, it's not," Karen had replied. "Your old life was there, but that life is gone, and you need to build a new one." Karen lived with her family on a small farm outside a town called Millbrook in Montana. Her husband David had inherited the property from his grandfather, and they grew organic vegetables and raised chickens. It was a simple life, but it was peaceful and fulfilling in ways that Lisa's high-powered career had never been. The more Karen thought about it, the more convinced she became that Lisa needed to come to Montana. Not for a visit, but to stay. To get away from all the reminders of her old life and discover what she could build with what she had left. Karen knew that Lisa would never agree to come willingly. She was too proud and too convinced that her life was over. So Karen decided to take matters into her own hands. She drove 18 hours straight from Montana to New York, stopping only for gas and coffee. She had told David she was going to get Lisa whether Lisa wanted to come or not. Her husband had looked worried but hadn't tried to stop her. He knew that when Karen made up her mind about something, there was no changing it. Karen arrived at Lisa's apartment early on a Tuesday morning. She used the spare key that Lisa had given her and let herself in. Lisa was still in bed, though it was almost noon. The apartment was messy, with empty takeout containers on the counter and clothes scattered around. "Get up," Karen said, pulling open the curtains to let in the sunlight. "We're leaving." Lisa squinted against the brightness and pulled a pillow over her head. "Go away, Karen, I don't want company today." Karen pulled the pillow away and looked at her sister seriously. "I'm not company. I'm family, and I'm not leaving here without you." For the next hour, the sisters argued. Lisa said she couldn't just abandon her life in New York. Karen pointed out that Lisa didn't have much of a life to abandon. Lisa said she had doctor appointments and physical therapy sessions. Karen said they had doctors in Montana too. Finally, Karen played her trump card. "Mom and Dad would be ashamed to see you like this," she said quietly. Their parents had died in a car accident 5 years earlier, and both sisters still felt their loss deeply. Their mother had been a strong woman who had raised 2 daughters to believe they could accomplish anything. Their father had taught them that life would knock them down sometimes, but the important thing was to get back up. Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "They would be ashamed," she agreed. "But I don't know how to get back up this time." "That's why you're coming with me," Karen said gently. "You can't figure it out here surrounded by everything that reminds you of who you used to be. You need a fresh start." Karen began packing Lisa's things while Lisa watched from her wheelchair. She packed practical clothes, jeans, sweaters, comfortable shoes. She left behind the expensive business suits that Lisa would probably never wear again. The drive to Montana was the longest 18 hours of both their lives. Lisa was angry for the first few hours, complaining that Karen had no right to kidnap her. But gradually her anger faded into resignation, and then into something that might have been curiosity. They stopped at a hotel in Illinois for the night. Karen had to help Lisa transfer from the car to her wheelchair, and then from the wheelchair to the hotel bed. It was awkward and humiliating for Lisa, who had once prided herself on her independence. "This is why I can't travel," Lisa said as Karen helped her get settled. "Everything is so complicated now." "It's only complicated because it's new," Karen replied. "Once you get used to it, it becomes normal." The next morning, they continued their journey west. As they drove through Iowa and Nebraska, the landscape began to change. The crowded highways and cities gave way to open fields and small towns. Lisa found herself looking out the window with interest for the first time in months. "It's so empty," she said as they passed through a town that consisted of little more than a gas station and a diner. "It's not empty," Karen corrected. "It's peaceful." "There's a difference." They crossed into Montana late in the afternoon. The sky seemed bigger here, stretching endlessly in all directions. The mountains rose in the distance like sleeping giants, and the air smelled clean and fresh. Karen's farm was located 5 miles outside Millbrook, down a dirt road that made Lisa's wheelchair bounce and rattle in the back of the car. The farmhouse was old but well-maintained, with a wide front porch and a red barn behind it. David came out to greet them, along with their 2 children, 10-year-old Amy and 8-year-old Tyler. The kids were excited to meet their famous Aunt Lisa, though they were too young to fully understand what had happened to her. That first evening, Lisa sat on the front porch in her wheelchair, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The silence was overwhelming after months of city noise. She could hear birds singing, wind rustling through the trees, and the distant sound of cows lowing in a neighbor's field. "It's too quiet," she told Karen. "How do you stand it?" Karen smiled as she served dinner on the porch. "You'll get used to it. The quiet gives you space to think." "That's what I'm afraid of," Lisa replied. But despite her fears, Lisa found herself sleeping better that first night than she had in months. There were no sirens, no car horns, no sounds of people arguing in the street. Just the gentle sounds of the countryside settling in for the night. She woke up the next morning to the smell of bacon cooking and the sound of children laughing. Through her bedroom window, she could see Karen's vegetable garden and a chicken coop where several red hens were pecking at the ground. It wasn't the life Lisa had planned for herself, but for the first time since her accident, she felt like she might be able to build something new. Lisa had been living at Karen's farm for 2 weeks when she first met the neighbor who would change her life. She was sitting on the front porch, reading a book and trying to ignore the constant buzz of insects that seemed to be everywhere in the countryside. A dusty pickup truck pulled into the driveway, and a man got out slowly. Lisa noticed immediately that he walked with a slight limp, favoring his left leg. He was tall and lean, with sun-weathered skin and calloused hands that spoke of years of hard work. "Morning, Karen," he called out as he approached the porch. His voice was deep and calm, with a slight country accent that Lisa found surprisingly pleasant. Karen came out of the house, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Hey, Ben!" "Perfect timing. I was just about to call you about that fence post that's been wobbling." Ben Thompson was 35 years old and had lived his entire life in this valley, except for the 6 years he had spent in the Army. He had served 2 tours in Afghanistan as a combat engineer, defusing bombs and building roads in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. 3 years ago, his unit had hit an improvised explosive device while on patrol. 3 soldiers had died that day, and Ben had lost his left leg below the knee. The physical wound had healed, but the emotional scars ran deeper. When Ben came home to Montana, he struggled to adjust to civilian life. The small-town pace felt strange after years of military discipline and constant danger. He had nightmares about the explosion and felt guilty about surviving when his friends hadn't. Gradually, though, he found peace in working with his hands and caring for animals. He took over his family's ranch after his father retired, raising horses and cattle on land that had been in the Thompson family for 4 generations. "You must be Lisa," Ben said, nodding toward the porch where she sat. "Karen told me you'd be staying for a while." Lisa felt self-conscious as Ben's eyes briefly glanced at her wheelchair. She was used to people staring or looking away uncomfortably, but Ben did neither. He looked at her face, not her legs, and his expression was neither pitying nor curious. "That's right," Lisa replied, unsure how much Karen had told him about her situation. "Well, welcome to Millbrook," Ben said simply. "Hope you like it here." There was something about his tone that made Lisa believe he genuinely meant it. He wasn't offering false encouragement or empty platitudes. He was just being neighborly in the straightforward way that seemed common in this part of the world. Ben and Karen walked over to examine the fence post that was causing problems. Lisa watched as Ben knelt down to look at the foundation, his prosthetic leg clearly visible below his jeans. He didn't seem self-conscious about it at all, which surprised her. "The whole thing needs to be reset," Ben told Karen. "I can come back this weekend with my tools and fix it properly." "What do I owe you?" Karen asked. Ben waved off the question. "Nothing. We're neighbors. That's what neighbors do." After Ben left, Lisa asked Karen about him. She learned that Ben was one of the most respected people in the community, always willing to help others with repairs, animal emergencies, or just about anything else that needed doing. "He's been through a lot," Karen said carefully. "Losing his leg in Afghanistan was hard on him, but he never complains or asks for sympathy. He just gets on with his life." Lisa found herself thinking about Ben that evening as she lay in bed. There was something about his quiet confidence that intrigued her. He had seemed completely at peace with himself, despite his obvious disability. Ben returned that Saturday morning to fix the fence. Lisa watched from the porch as he worked, moving efficiently despite his prosthetic leg. When he took a break for lunch, Karen invited him to join them on the porch. "How long have you been in a wheelchair?" Ben asked Lisa directly, without any of the awkwardness that most people showed. "About 4 months," Lisa replied, surprised by his straightforward question. "Accident?" "I fell down some courthouse steps in New York." Ben nodded thoughtfully. Cities can be dangerous places. Too much concrete, not enough dirt. Lisa found herself smiling at that observation. "I never thought of it that way." "Different kinds of dangers everywhere," Ben continued. "In Afghanistan, we worried about roadside bombs. Here it's more likely to be a spooked horse or a broken ladder, but you learn to adapt." "How do you do it?" Lisa asked impulsively. "How do you stay so positive?" Ben was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. "I'm not always positive," he said honestly. "Some days are harder than others, but I figured out that I had 2 choices: feel sorry for myself or find new ways to be useful." "And you chose useful." "Most days," Ben replied with a slight smile. "Though I'll admit, there are still days when I choose feeling sorry for myself. The trick is not to stay there too long." Over the following weeks, Ben became a regular presence at the farm. Sometimes he came to help with repairs or maintenance, but increasingly he seemed to just enjoy the company. He would sit on the porch in the evenings, talking with Lisa about everything from local politics to philosophy. Lisa learned that Ben had been an engineering student before he enlisted in the Army. He was intelligent and well-read, though he wore his knowledge lightly. He could discuss complex topics without making others feel stupid, and he had a dry sense of humor that made Lisa laugh for the first time in months. "You know what I miss most about having 2 legs?" Ben said one evening as they watched the sunset. "What?" Lisa asked. "Nothing," he replied. "I thought I would miss all sorts of things, but mostly I just miss the leg itself. Not anything I could do with it, just having it there." Lisa understood exactly what he meant. She missed the feeling of her legs, the simple awareness of having them, more than any specific activity she could no longer do. "People keep asking me what I can't do now," Lisa said, "but they never ask what I've learned that I couldn't learn before." "And what have you learned?" Ben asked. Lisa thought for a moment. "That most of the things I thought were important really weren't, and that people can be kind in ways I never noticed when I was rushing around trying to be successful." Ben nodded slowly. "Funny how it takes losing something to figure out what actually matters." As the weeks passed, Lisa found herself looking forward to Ben's visits. He never treated her like she was fragile or broken. He asked her opinion on ranch management decisions and listened seriously to her answers. He brought her books from his collection and challenged her to chess games that lasted for hours. Most importantly, he showed her that it was possible to build a meaningful life even after everything you thought defined you had been taken away. Ben had lost his leg in his military career, but he had found purpose in caring for his land, his animals, and his community. Watching Ben, Lisa began to believe that maybe she could find her own new purpose too. The morning Lisa first ventured off the porch was a Tuesday in November. She had been living at Karen's farm for 6 weeks, and the Montana winter was beginning to set in. The air was crisp and clean, and frost covered the ground like tiny diamonds. Ben had arrived early that morning with lumber and tools in the back of his pickup truck. Lisa watched from the kitchen window as he unloaded boards and began measuring something near the front steps. "What's he doing?" she asked Karen, who was making breakfast. Karen glanced outside and smiled. "I think he's building you a ramp." Lisa felt a mix of gratitude and embarrassment. She hadn't asked for a ramp, and she didn't like the idea of being someone's charity project. But when she wheeled out to the porch to confront Ben about it, he spoke before she could say anything. "This porch is too high," he said without looking up from his work. "Been bothering me for weeks. David's going to hurt his back carrying those feed bags up these steps." It was a lie, and they both knew it. But it was a kind lie that allowed Lisa to accept his help without feeling pitied. Ben worked steadily for 3 hours, creating a gentle slope that would allow wheelchair access to the porch. "There," he said when he finished. "Much better." Lisa rolled down the ramp slowly, testing its stability. It was perfectly built, smooth and sturdy. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" Ben replied with a straight face. "I told you this was about those feed bags." Later that week, Ben showed up with a different wheelchair than the standard hospital model Lisa had been using. This one had larger wheels with thick treads, and the frame looked more robust. "Where did this come from?" Lisa asked. "Modified it myself," Ben said, kneeling down to show her the improvements he had made. "These wheels will handle rough terrain better. And see this lever here? It makes the seat higher so you can reach things easier." He had clearly spent hours working on the wheelchair, adding features that would make Lisa's life more comfortable. The attention to detail was remarkable. He had even added a cup holder and a small storage compartment. "Why would you do all this?" Lisa asked, overwhelmed by his kindness. Ben stood up and wiped his hands on his jeans. "Same reason you'd help someone if you could. Because that's what decent people do." With her new wheelchair, Lisa began exploring the farm property. At first, she stayed close to the house, but gradually she grew more adventurous. She discovered that the farm was larger than she had realized, with fields stretching out toward the mountains and a small creek running along the back boundary. One afternoon, Ben found her stuck in a muddy patch near the vegetable garden. Instead of just pushing her out, he showed her how to rock the wheelchair back and forth to gain momentum and escape soft ground. "Everything's a technique," he explained. "Once you learn the tricks, you can go almost anywhere." Ben had a way of treating obstacles as puzzles to be solved, rather than barriers to be defeated by. When Lisa mentioned that she missed being able to reach high shelves, he showed her how to use a long-handled tool he had made. When she complained about getting cold sitting still outside, he brought her a battery-powered heated cushion. But the real breakthrough came when Ben invited Lisa to visit his ranch. She had been curious about his horses ever since he started talking about them, but she had assumed that his property would be inaccessible to her wheelchair. "Come on," he said one Saturday morning. "There's someone I want you to meet." Ben's ranch was only a mile away, but it felt like entering a different world. The main house was older than Karen's farmhouse, with a wide front porch and weathered siding that had been painted white many years ago. Behind the house stood a large red barn and several fenced pastures where horses grazed peacefully. "That's Thunder," Ben said, pointing to a massive black stallion in the nearest field. "He's the boss around here and he knows it." But it wasn't Thunder that captured Lisa's attention. In a separate pasture stood a smaller horse, a brown mare with white markings on her face. Unlike the other horses, this one stood apart from the group, and Lisa could see that something was wrong with her left front leg. "What happened to her?" Lisa asked. "That's Hope," Ben said. "Found her about a year ago, half-starved and with a badly broken leg. The vet said I should put her down, that she'd never be useful again." Lisa watched as Hope moved carefully around the pasture, favoring her injured leg but still managing to graze and interact with the other horses. "But you didn't give up on her." "Nope," Ben said simply. Figured she deserved a chance to prove everyone wrong. Ben opened the gate and wheeled Lisa into the pasture. Hope approached them slowly, curious but cautious. When she reached Lisa's wheelchair, she sniffed carefully and then gently nuzzled Lisa's hand. "She likes you," Ben observed. Lisa stroked Hope's neck, feeling the warmth of the animal's skin and the soft texture of her coat. It was the first time since her accident that she had felt truly connected to another living being. "How did you train her to trust people again?" Lisa asked. "Patience," Ben replied, "and consistency. Every day I'd come out here and just sit with her. Didn't try to force anything, just let her get used to having me around. Eventually she decided I was safe." Lisa understood that Ben was talking about more than just horse training. He was showing her that healing took time, and that broken things could learn to be whole again in new ways. Over the following weeks, Ben taught Lisa how to care for the horses. He showed her how to brush them, how to feed them, and how to read their body language. Working with the animals gave Lisa a sense of purpose that she hadn't felt since before her accident. "You're good at this," Ben told her one afternoon as she groomed Hope. "You have gentle hands and a calm energy. The horses can sense that." Lisa had never thought of herself as having a way with animals, but she found that she enjoyed the quiet communication that happened between human and horse. There was something peaceful about the routine of caring for creatures that asked for nothing more than food, water, and kindness. Ben also began inviting Lisa to help with other ranch tasks. She learned to repair fence posts from her wheelchair, to organize feed supplies, and to keep records of the horse's health and breeding information. Her legal training made her particularly good at the paperwork side of ranch management. "You know," Ben said one evening as they finished updating the farm's financial records. "You could probably help a lot of the ranchers around here with their business side. Most of us are good with animals, but terrible with contracts and legal stuff." The idea had never occurred to Lisa, but she found herself thinking about it. Maybe there was a way to use her legal skills in this new environment, helping people who worked with their hands rather than corporations that only cared about profits. As winter deepened, Lisa realized that she was looking forward to each day in a way she hadn't since before her accident. She woke up excited to see the horses, to help with ranch work, and to spend time with Ben, whose quiet wisdom had become one of the most important parts of her new life. She was beginning to understand that healing wasn't about getting back to who she used to be. It was about discovering who she could become. Spring arrived in Millbrook like a gentle awakening. The snow melted to reveal green grass pushing through the earth, and the creek behind Karen's farm swelled with fresh mountain water. Lisa had been living in Montana for 5 months now, and she barely recognized the person she had become. The transformation had been gradual, like the changing of the seasons. The pale, bitter woman who had arrived from New York was now tanned from spending hours outdoors. Her arms had grown strong from maneuvering her wheelchair over rough terrain, and her eyes held a spark of interest that had been missing for months. The change became obvious one morning when Karen's neighbor, Mrs. Chen, stopped by in tears. She was an elderly woman who lived alone on a small farm 3 miles down the road. Her husband had died the previous year, and she was struggling to manage the property by herself. "They're trying to take my farm," Mrs. Chen said, her voice shaking as she showed Karen a stack of legal documents. "The bank says I missed too many payments, but I don't understand all this paperwork." Karen looked at the documents helplessly. She had never been good with legal language, and the forms were filled with terms that made no sense to her. But Lisa, who had been listening from the kitchen, wheeled herself over to take a look. "May I?" Lisa asked, reaching for the papers. As Lisa read through the foreclosure notice, her legal training kicked in automatically. She could see immediately that there were problems with the bank's case. The dates didn't match up, and several required notifications had never been properly served. "This is wrong," Lisa said, looking up at Mrs. Chen. "They can't foreclose based on these documents. They've made several procedural errors." For the next 2 hours, Lisa went through every piece of paperwork with Mrs. Chen, explaining what each form meant and what her options were. She found that the elderly woman actually qualified for a federal program that could help her restructure her loan payments. "But how do I apply for this program?" Mrs. Chen asked. "I don't understand all these forms." Without thinking, Lisa said, "I'll help you fill them out." It took 3 days to complete all the paperwork. But Lisa found herself energized by the work in a way she hadn't expected. This wasn't about corporate profits or legal technicalities. This was about helping a real person save her home and her livelihood. When Mrs. Chen received approval for the loan modification program, she broke down in tears of relief. "You saved my farm," she said, hugging Lisa tightly. "I don't know how to thank you." Word of Lisa's help spread quickly through the small community. Within a week, 2 other families had stopped by Karen's farm asking for legal advice. A young couple was being overcharged by a contractor who had done shoddy work on their roof. An elderly man needed help understanding his late wife's will. Lisa found herself saying yes to each request, despite having no official license to practice law in Montana. She researched each case carefully, spending hours on her laptop looking up state laws and regulations. Ben helped by driving her to the county courthouse when she needed to file documents or research property records. "You're different now," Ben observed one evening as they sat on the porch after a long day of working on a contract dispute for a local rancher. "You seem alive again." Lisa realized he was right. For the first time since her accident, she felt like she was making a real difference in people's lives. These weren't wealthy corporations trying to maximize their profits. These were hardworking people who needed someone to help them navigate a legal system that often seemed designed to confuse and intimidate. "I want to make this official," Lisa told Karen one night over dinner. "I want to take the Montana bar exam and set up a practice here." Karen nearly choked on her food. "Really? But what about New York? What about your old firm? What about it?" Lisa replied, "That life is over. This is my life now." The process of getting licensed to practice law in Montana was complicated, but Lisa threw herself into it with the same determination she had once applied to corporate cases. She studied for the bar exam while also helping local families with their legal problems on an informal basis. Ben supported her efforts by helping her find office space in town. The building was old and needed work, but it was affordable and located right on Main Street. Lisa loved the idea of having a practice where clients could walk in off the street instead of having to make appointments weeks in advance. As she prepared for the bar exam, Lisa also began working with Ben on an idea that had been growing in both their minds. They wanted to create a program that would use horses to help other veterans and people with disabilities. Horses don't care if you're missing a leg or can't walk, Ben explained to a group of potential investors at the community center. They respond to your energy and your intentions. Working with them teaches you that you're still capable of building relationships and accomplishing meaningful work. Lisa used her legal and business skills to research grants and write applications for funding. She discovered that there were several federal programs that provided money for therapeutic horse programs, especially those that served veterans. Their first grant application was for $50,000 from a veterans organization. Lisa spent weeks crafting the proposal, drawing on her experience writing legal briefs to make a compelling case for their program. "We're not just asking for money," she told Ben as they reviewed the final draft. "We're asking them to invest in the idea that people can rebuild their lives after trauma." While they waited to hear about the grant, Lisa and Ben began preparing for their bar exam results and planning their therapeutic program. They spent hours discussing how the program would work, what kind of training they would need, and how many people they could realistically help. Lisa also found herself thinking more and more about Ben as something other than just a friend and business partner. She had grown to respect his quiet strength, his practical wisdom, and his unwavering commitment to helping others. She loved the way he treated her as an equal, never making her feel like her disability defined her. One evening, as they were working late in the barn, preparing stalls for the horses they hoped to acquire for their program, Ben stopped what he was doing and looked at her seriously. "Lisa," he said, "I need to tell you something." Her heart skipped a beat, unsure what he was going to say. "When you first came here, I thought you were just another city person who would get bored with country life and leave," he continued. "But you've proven me wrong about a lot of things." "What kinds of things?" Lisa asked softly. "About what makes a person strong. About what really matters in life, about—" He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "About what it means to find someone who understands you." Lisa felt her cheeks grow warm. "Ben, I know this is complicated," he said quickly. "We're both dealing with our own challenges, and we're trying to build this business together. But I needed you to know how I feel." Lisa reached out and took his hand. "It's not complicated," she said. "At least not in the way you think. Yes, we're both dealing with disabilities. Yes, we're starting a business together, but that doesn't change the fact that I care about you too." Ben smiled, the tension leaving his face. "So where does that leave us?" "It leaves us building something together," Lisa replied. "Not just the therapeutic program, but a life. A real life based on who we are now, not who we used to be." As they sat together in the barn, surrounded by the smell of hay and the soft sounds of horses settling in for the night, Lisa realized that she had found something she had never even known she was looking for. Not just love, but a sense of purpose that went beyond personal success or recognition. She was building a life that mattered, with a man who understood that strength comes not from avoiding hardship, but from finding ways to use your struggles to help others. The phone call came on a cold February morning, just as Lisa was getting ready to drive to her new law office in town. She had passed the Montana bar exam 3 months earlier and was slowly building her practice, helping local families with everything from property disputes to estate planning. "Ben Thompson?" The voice on the other end was formal and businesslike. "This is First National Bank calling about your overdue mortgage payments." Lisa watched Ben's face change as he listened to the conversation. His jaw tightened, and she could see the stress lines forming around his eyes. When he hung up the phone, he sat down heavily at the kitchen table. "How bad is it?" Lisa asked gently. Ben rubbed his face with both hands. "Bad. They're talking about foreclosure if I don't catch up on payments by the end of March." Lisa had known that Ben was struggling financially, but she hadn't realized how serious the situation had become. Like many veterans, Ben had been buried under medical bills related to his injury and recovery. The VA had covered some costs, but not everything, and the accumulated debt had been growing for years. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" Lisa asked. "Because it's my problem to solve," Ben replied stubbornly. "I've been trying to handle it myself." Lisa pulled her wheelchair closer to the table. "We're partners now, remember? Your problems are my problems too." Over the next few hours, Ben reluctantly showed Lisa the full extent of his financial situation. The ranch had been in his family for 4 generations, but it was now mortgaged to the limit. Between medical bills, property taxes, and equipment loans, Ben owed nearly $200,000. "The worst part is, the ranch is worth more than what I owe," Ben explained. "But everything's tied up in the land and buildings. I can't liquidate assets without selling the whole place." Lisa spent the rest of the day studying Ben's financial documents with the same intensity she had once applied to corporate mergers. She made lists, calculated payment schedules, and researched every possible option for relief. That evening, she called her former colleague Michael in New York. Despite their different life paths, Michael had remained friendly and supportive of Lisa's new career. "I need help with a veterans benefits case," Lisa told him. "It's complicated, and I need someone who knows federal law inside and out." Michael agreed to research Ben's situation pro bono, calling in favors from lawyers who specialized in veterans affairs. Within a week, he had uncovered several programs that Ben had never been told about: disability benefits he should have been receiving, medical expense reimbursements that had been denied incorrectly, and loan forgiveness programs specifically for disabled veterans. But even with these discoveries, Lisa realized they were racing against time. The bank was demanding payment by March 31st, and government bureaucracy moved slowly. They needed to file appeals, gather documentation, and navigate multiple federal agencies. Lisa threw herself into the work with a passion that surprised even her. She worked 16-hour days, making phone calls to government offices, drafting legal briefs, and researching obscure regulations. She barely slept, surviving on coffee and determination. "You're pushing yourself too hard," Karen warned during one of Lisa's rare breaks. "You're going to make yourself sick." But Lisa couldn't slow down. This wasn't just about saving Ben's ranch. It was about proving to herself that she could still fight for something that mattered. For the first time since her accident, she felt like the lawyer she used to be, but with a deeper understanding of what was truly at stake. The breakthrough came during a particularly grueling physical therapy session in Billings. Lisa had been making the 2-hour drive twice a week to work with a specialist who was helping her rebuild strength and mobility. The therapy was painful and exhausting, but she had committed to giving it everything she had. Dr. Rodriguez, her physical therapist, was pushing Lisa through a series of exercises designed to stimulate nerve function in her legs. Lisa had done these exercises hundreds of times before, always with the same result: nothing. But on this particular day, as Lisa strained against the resistance bands, she felt something different. A tiny sensation like an electric spark shot through her right leg. "Wait," Lisa said, stopping the exercise. "I felt something." Dr. Rodriguez immediately began testing Lisa's reflexes and sensation. When she touched Lisa's right ankle with a pin, Lisa could feel it. Not clearly, but definitely. "This is encouraging," Dr. Rodriguez said carefully, "but I don't want you to get your hopes up too high. Sometimes patients experience temporary sensations that don't lead to functional improvement." Lisa barely heard the warning. For the first time in over a year, she had felt something below her waist. It was proof that the connection between her brain and her legs wasn't completely severed. She drove home from Billings in a daze, her mind racing with possibilities. When she told Ben about the sensation, he was cautiously optimistic, but focused on the immediate crisis. "That's wonderful news," he said, holding her hands. "But right now we need to concentrate on saving the ranch. Everything else can wait." Lisa knew he was right, but the tiny spark of feeling in her leg had given her a new surge of energy. If her body could heal in unexpected ways, maybe she could find unexpected solutions to Ben's legal problems too. Working late into the night, Lisa discovered a little-known provision in the Veterans Affairs regulations that could retroactively increase Ben's disability rating. If she could prove that his PTSD was more severe than originally assessed, he would be eligible for significantly higher monthly payments. The problem was that proving increased PTSD severity required extensive documentation and psychological evaluation. Lisa spent 3 days tracking down Ben's former military commanders, medical personnel who had treated him, and fellow soldiers who could testify about his condition. Ben was reluctant to revisit his military trauma, but he understood that it might be their only chance to save the ranch. He submitted to hours of psychological evaluation, answering painful questions about his nightmares, anxiety, and depression. "I hate talking about this stuff," he told Lisa after a particularly difficult session. "It makes me feel weak." "You're not weak," Lisa replied firmly. "You're fighting for your home, your family's legacy, and your future. That takes incredible strength." As March approached, Lisa was working on multiple fronts. She was filing appeals with 3 different government agencies, preparing for a foreclosure hearing, and coordinating with specialists in Billings about her own recovery. The physical therapy was showing gradual progress. Lisa could now feel sensation in both legs, though it was still limited. Dr. Rodriguez had cautiously suggested that with continued intensive therapy, Lisa might eventually regain some mobility, but Lisa barely had time to process this amazing news. Ben's foreclosure hearing was scheduled for March 25th, and she still didn't have all the documentation she needed to prove his case. On March 20th, everything came together at once. The VA called to inform Ben that his disability rating had been increased to 100%, making him eligible for retroactive payments totaling over $60,000. A federal loan forgiveness program approved his application, eliminating another $40,000 in debt. Lisa walked into the foreclosure hearing with a briefcase full of documents and a confidence she hadn't felt since before her accident. She systematically demolished the bank's case, proving that Ben qualified for multiple forms of debt relief and payment assistance. The judge ruled in Ben's favor, giving him a restructured payment plan that he could actually afford. As they walked out of the courthouse, Ben swept Lisa up in a huge hug. "You saved my ranch," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You saved my family's legacy." But Lisa knew that in saving Ben's ranch, she had also saved herself. She had discovered that her skills as a lawyer were more powerful when used to help real people with real problems. She had found strength she didn't know she possessed, both physical and emotional. That night, as they celebrated with Karen's family and half the town of Millbrook, Lisa felt a tingling in her legs that was stronger than anything she had experienced before. She looked at Ben, surrounded by people who loved and respected him, and realized that she had found something more valuable than the life she had lost. She had found a life worth fighting for. 2 years after the accident that changed everything, Lisa stood at the back of Millbrook's small community church, her heart pounding with nervous excitement. The morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns across the wooden pews where nearly the entire town had gathered. She wore a simple white dress that Karen had helped her choose, elegant but practical for someone who might need to use both a wheelchair and leg braces. Her physical recovery had been remarkable but incomplete. She could walk short distances with the help of specially designed braces, but she still relied on her wheelchair for longer periods. The recovery had been gradual and sometimes frustrating. Months of intensive physical therapy in Billings had slowly restored partial feeling and limited mobility to her legs. Some days were better than others, and Lisa had learned to be patient with her body's limitations while celebrating every small victory. "You ready for this?" Karen asked, adjusting Lisa's veil one final time. Lisa looked down the aisle toward the altar where Ben waited in his best suit, flanked by his groomsman David and their friend Tom from the Veterans Support Group. Ben's face was calm, but his eyes were bright with emotion as he watched her prepare to walk toward him. "I've never been more ready for anything in my life," Lisa replied truthfully. The transformation of the past 2 years had been remarkable for both of them. After saving Ben's ranch from foreclosure, Lisa had thrown herself into building her law practice and their therapeutic horse program with equal passion. Word of her success had spread throughout Montana, and she now had clients driving from hundreds of miles away to get her help with legal problems. Her practice had grown from a single room above the hardware store to a proper office building on Main Street, complete with wheelchair-accessible entrances and a conference room where she met with ranchers, families, and small business owners who needed legal guidance they could trust and afford. But it was the therapeutic horse program that had become the true center of their lives together. With the help of federal grants and community fundraising, Lisa and Ben had built a state-of-the-art facility that served veterans, children with disabilities, and anyone who needed the healing power of working with horses. The program had started small, with just Hope and 2 other rescued horses. Now they had 12 horses, a full-time staff of 3, and a waiting list of people who wanted to participate. Lisa had even testified before the state legislature about the benefits of equine therapy, helping to secure ongoing funding for similar programs across Montana. The music began, and Lisa took a deep breath. She had practiced this walk dozens of times with her physical therapist, but doing it in front of the entire community felt different. Using her leg braces and gripping Ben's arm for support, she began the slow journey down the aisle. Each step was deliberate and careful, but Lisa felt stronger with every movement. The congregation rose to their feet, many of them wiping away tears as they watched her walk toward the man who had helped her discover that love could bloom even in the darkest soil. Mrs. Chen was in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. The elderly woman had become one of Lisa's dearest friends after their successful fight to save her farm. Beside her sat the Martinez family, whose son had been helped by the horse therapy program after struggling with autism. Veteran friends of Ben's filled several rows, many of them participants in support groups that Lisa and Ben had helped establish. As Lisa reached the altar, she looked into Ben's eyes and saw her own journey reflected there. They had both been broken by life in different ways, but they had found healing in their commitment to each other and to serving their community. Pastor Williams, who had ministered to Millbrook for over 30 years, smiled warmly as he began the ceremony. We are gathered here today to witness the union of 2 people who have shown us all what it means to transform pain into purpose and loss into love. The vows Lisa and Ben had written reflected their unique journey together. Lisa spoke about learning that strength wasn't about never falling down, but about finding the courage to build something beautiful from the pieces that remained. Ben talked about discovering that the heart could heal even when the body bore permanent scars. When they exchanged rings, Lisa thought about the engagement ring Ben had given her 6 months earlier. He had proposed not with grand gestures or expensive restaurants, but during a quiet evening in the horse barn as they worked together to help a traumatized veteran learn to trust again. You've taught me that love isn't about finding someone perfect, he had said that night. It's about finding someone whose imperfections fit perfectly with your own. Now, as Pastor Williams pronounced them husband and wife, Lisa felt a completeness she had never experienced during her high-powered days in New York. This wasn't the life she had planned, but it was infinitely better than anything she could have imagined. The reception was held in the community center, decorated with wildflowers and photos that told the story of Lisa and Ben's relationship. There were pictures of their first meeting, their work building the therapeutic program, and quiet moments of their life together on the ranch. During dinner, several people stood to offer toasts. Tom, Ben's army buddy who now managed the veteran support group, spoke about how Lisa had helped him navigate his disability benefits and find meaningful work. Amy, Karen's daughter, who was now 12, talked about how Aunt Lisa had taught her that being different wasn't something to be ashamed of. But it was Mrs. Chen who brought tears to everyone's eyes when she stood up with her cane and spoke in her soft, accented voice. 2 years ago, I thought I was going to lose everything, she said. My farm, my home, my independence. Lisa saved all of that for me, but more importantly, she showed me that angels don't always have wings. Sometimes they have wheels. As the evening wound down, Lisa and Ben stepped outside for a quiet moment alone. The Montana sky was clear and full of stars, and the mountains stood silhouettely against the horizon like sleeping giants. Any regrets? Ben asked, putting his arm around her shoulders. Lisa thought about the question seriously. Did she regret the accident that had changed everything? Did she miss the excitement of corporate law, the expensive apartment, the recognition that came with winning high-profile cases? None, she said finally. If I hadn't fallen down those steps, I never would have found this life. I never would have found you. They stood together in comfortable silence, listening to the sounds of their friends and neighbors cleaning up inside. Tomorrow they would fly to Hawaii for a honeymoon that would include adaptive surfing lessons and visits to therapeutic horse programs on other islands. When they returned, they would move into the house they had built together on Ben's ranch, designed to be accessible and comfortable for both of them. But tonight was about celebrating the journey that had brought them to this moment. Lisa thought about the woman she had been 2 years ago, driven, successful, but ultimately empty. That woman had measured her worth by billable hours and bank balances. She had thought happiness could be achieved through career advancement and material success. The woman Lisa had become understood that true success was measured differently. It was counted in lives touched, problems solved, and relationships built. It was found in the trust of a rescued horse, the gratitude of a family saved from foreclosure, and the love of a man who saw her strength rather than her limitations. Lisa's law practice now served people who truly needed help, rather than corporations looking to maximize profits. Her work with the Therapeutic Horse Program had helped dozens of veterans and disabled individuals discover their own strength and purpose. She had built a life based on service rather than ambition, and she had never been happier. As they finally went inside to say goodbye to their guests, Lisa reflected on the unexpected turns that had led her to this moment. Sometimes the worst thing that could happen to you turned out to be the best thing that could happen to you, but only if you were brave enough to let it transform you. Her accident had ended one life, but it had also begun another, a life filled with deeper purpose. Genuine relationships and a love she had never known was possible. Lisa's destiny hadn't been changed by her fall down those courthouse steps. It had been revealed. The woman who had once rushed through life in expensive heels now moved through the world more slowly, but with far greater intention. She had learned that it wasn't how fast you moved that mattered, but how much love and healing you left in your wake. As she and Ben drove home to their ranch under the star-filled Montana sky, Lisa knew that her story was just beginning. There were more lives to touch, more problems to solve, more love to give and receive. Her legs might never work the way they once had, but her heart and mind were stronger than they had ever been. She had found her true calling not in spite of her limitations, but because of them. And in that discovery, she had found not just love and purpose, but a peace that no amount of professional success could have ever provided.